My name is Riley. I'm 30 years old, living and working in Seattle as an interior architect. To outsiders, I'm a calm, independent woman who always knows how to step aside. But if you grew up in a family where love was conditional, you'd understand silence can cut deeper than criticism. That evening, in a luxury restaurant by the lake, my entire extended family gathered. You'd think it was to celebrate my 30th birthday, but it wasn't. They were there for my younger sister, Madison, who had just turned 27, the rising singer, the golden child of my parents. When my father raised his glass, he said proudly, "Madison deserves everything. Riley, you just need to learn to be grateful for being her sister." The whole room burst into laughter, cameras flashing nonstop while I sat frozen. No one noticed what I was clutching inside my evening bag. They didn't know I was holding a set of documents that could unravel the perfect family picture they had worked so hard to paint. Have you ever been forgotten on your own birthday? Have you ever been treated like a shadow invisible just because you weren't the chosen child? If this story touches you, share your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe to uncover the truth behind that party and the journey that forced my family to see me differently. Because what happened after that night, none of them could have imagined. I still remember my 10th birthday. My mother bought Madison a pink lace dress while I was assigned to make sure it didn't get dirty. The party wasn't for me, even though it was on my actual birthday. Madison sang happy birthday so sweetly that neighbors leaned in through the windows to listen, while I stood behind the cake table unnoticed. Mom patted my head absent-mindedly, then rushed off to fix Madison's hair. Dad was busy entertaining guests. I blew out my candles alone, under dim light, with scattered claps. The years after weren't much better. Whenever I got a high grade, Dad would nod. Good, but don't get complacent. But when Madison won a district singing contest, the whole family celebrated like she had won a Grammy. Over time, I taught myself not to expect anything from them. My father was the chief accountant for a transport company. My mother had been a vocal coach, but she quit early to devote herself entirely to Madison when she was just 6. Madison was enrolled in singing, dance, and piano lessons. I, on the other hand, studied on my own, packed my own lunches, and rode the bus alone starting in 5th grade. I once thought that was normal, that older sisters everywhere had to sacrifice. But by high school, I realized the favoritism wasn't accidental. When I won a full scholarship to the University of Oregon's School of Architecture, Mom only asked, "Are you sure you can handle it? Madison has a show next month. Could you take her to her sound check?" Not a single congratulations. Dad's response? "Studying is your responsibility. Art, on the other hand, requires inspiration and sacrifice." I didn't argue. I just nodded, as always, then packed my bags and left the house that had no space for the child who wasn't chosen. But I refused to let that bury me. I studied as if the world had no audience. No one watching, no one cheering. Still, I kept going. Stressful presentations, sleepless nights over drafts, quiet internships at small firms. No one picked me up, no one checked in. It was just me, my blueprints, cardboard models, and the smell of glue clinging to my clothes. Meanwhile, Madison kept singing. She was invited to conferences, weddings, charity events. My parents were always there, backstage, pushing her toward the spotlight with eyes that seemed to say the world existed just to admire her. When I graduated with honors, they came, but not for me. Madison was performing at the commencement ceremony. Naturally, the attention drifted to her. I have one photo from that day. I'm in the middle, wearing my cap and gown, diploma in hand. My mother turned to Madison, whispering something that made them both laugh. My father looked into the camera with a distant gaze. And me? I smiled faintly. the smile of someone who had finished a long journey but still stood behind the curtain. After graduation, I didn't go home. I took a job at a small hotel design firm in Seattle, starting from scratch. No one knew I shared a basement apartment with 3 people for 8 months. No one cared that I worked past midnight, eating dry ramen for dinner. When I called home, Mom would only ask, "Are you lonely? If you're tired, just come back to Portland, help your dad with his paperwork, and drive Madison to vocal practice." I said, "I'm fine." Mom nodded. "Good." And I was fine. After 3 years, I was promoted to interior design team lead. I started managing projects, leading groups for mid-range hotels. I learned to negotiate, present ideas, and handle budgets. No one handed me a microphone. I built my own stage, brick by brick. By the 4th year, I led a historic hotel renovation in Bellevue, a project that had to preserve heritage while optimizing space and cost. I added local touches, exposed brick walls, warm amber lighting, curved steel frame windows. The client loved it so much they invited me to present to their national chain. I received a bonus of $85,000. I didn't tell anyone, no status updates, no photos. I had grown used to living quietly. Until that night, the so-called birthday for Madison, when I realized silence was no longer an option. While Mom laughed by the champagne table, Madison held the mic to sing a ballad she wrote for herself, and Dad raised his glass before more than 100 guests. Our youngest daughter, beautiful, talented, and deserving of everything. Riley, you should just be grateful to be her sister. I sat in the corner, under glittering lights and thundering applause, no one noticing my hand gripping my clutch. Inside was a notarized document dated 2 months earlier, my grandmother's handwritten will. Her shaky but clear words left all 15 acres in Oregon, including the historic farmhouse, to me. Not Madison, not anyone else. But my parents had hidden it. They quietly transferred the property into Madison's name through a fraudulent power of attorney, I had found out. And I had stayed silent until that night. Because the moment my father said I should be thankful just to be Madison's sister, I no longer wanted to sit in the shadows. I moved into my new condo in Queen Anne on a misty morning. Seattle rarely had sun, but that day, soft gray light poured through the windows, casting shadows on the hardwood floors I had personally chosen from the design plans. The building wasn't large, but it was quiet. I chose the 3rd floor, overlooking Lake Union, where each morning I could sip coffee and watch sailboats drift under low clouds. The condo was just over 700 square feet, but it was the first space in my life that truly felt mine. Every piece was my decision. The ash gray upholstered chair, the granite kitchen counter, the vintage bronze pendant light I found in a Capitol Hill thrift shop. No one told me the colors were wrong. No one asked why I didn't choose Madison's style. No one changed things behind my back. No one dismissed my ideas. Here, every detail was a quiet affirmation that I had taste, skill, and the power to turn vision into reality. Work at the hotel design firm grew steadier by my 4th year. I was assigned a boutique hotel renovation in Fremont, then a chain of 3 in Oregon. These weren't just contracts, they were chances to carve out my own voice in an industry still steeped in biases about age and gender. I wasn't flashy at conferences. I disliked networking parties. I thrived in quiet rooms, with CAD drawings open, cursor, gliding, my mind consumed by light, flow, and form. I designed so people would feel at peace the moment they stepped inside, as if the hotel had always existed in their memory, even if it was their first visit. Unspoken, but I poured my heart into every draft in a way no one had ever poured theirs into me. Success came quietly. I didn't brag. I just transferred money into a separate savings account, untouched by family ties. I never asked them for a dime, never told them what I had achieved. When I finished the Fairmont Heritage Interiors in Bellevue, the owners called me up to their top floor office. They didn't sugarcoat it. They thanked me for turning around a property that had been losing over $300,000 each quarter, transforming it into a destination featured in Travel Weekly just 7 months after reopening. They handed me a check for $85,000, an amount so staggering I had to sit in my car for almost an hour to steady my breath. I didn't tell anyone. I quietly invested $60,000, part in real estate, part in green stocks, part in savings for my own design studio. I didn't flaunt the condo, didn't post photos, didn't invite family over. I didn't want them stepping in, glancing around, and saying things like, "Why not put Madison's photo here?" Or, "This kitchen is too small by mom's standards." Occasionally, Madison would call. She hadn't changed. Still that clear voice, still her proud stories of gigs, Spotify covers, the new manager signing with a San Diego label. She never asked how I was, never cared what I was working on. Calls always ended with, "If you have time, visit mom and dad. I've been too busy to stop by." I'd just say, "Sure." I wasn't angry at Madison. Not really. She didn't create the favoritism. She just grew up in it, never needing to notice who was sitting quietly in the hallway. At an internal meeting one day, our CEO unexpectedly walked in. He stood at the back while I presented the redesign for a lakeside hotel in Spokane. Afterward, he pulled me aside and said only, "Your name is on the short list for design director this year. Be ready." I bowed my head, thanked him. But walking out of that room, what swelled inside me wasn't about the promotion. It was about finally being seen for the work I had devoted my whole life to, quietly, relentlessly. That night, I opened a bottle of wine, set my glass on the quartz counter, soft light spilling across the slate blue walls I had chosen. Jazz played low in the background, filling the space between thoughts. Numbers spun in my mind: the bonus, the condo's market value, the growing investments, the plan for a small studio in West Seattle. All of it possible, all of it mine if I kept silent, kept avoiding family, kept being the self-sufficient woman no one needed to acknowledge. But I knew one thing with certainty: silence has its limits. And it had reached its edge the night my father said I should be grateful just to be Madison's sister. In that room of glittering lights and laughter, I realized I no longer wanted to hide. Not for recognition, but because I had become strong enough not to fear their gaze. The party was held at Shoreline View, right on Lake Sammamish, a place I once dreamed of in my early working years, only able to admire from a distance. The second floor of the restaurant was reserved. Crystal chandeliers, white flower petals lining the aisle, long tables draped in velvet cream. Every detail fussed over as if it were an engagement party, not a birthday. But it wasn't mine. The marquee at the entrance rimmed with blinking lights, red and bold. "Happy birthday, Madison, musical angel at 27. I froze at the sign for a few seconds. No one in the family mentioned that it was also my birthday, my 30th. Madison arrived late, as always, and made the entire room turn heads. Silver silk dress hugging her, figure, hair in loose waves, lips painted wine red. My parents rushed to greet her like she was stepping off a Broadway stage. Dad opened the car door. Mom fussed over her strap under the photographer's flashes hired to cover the artistic event. I sat at a side table, next to distant relatives, whose names I barely remembered. When she walked in, everyone stood, applauding. Dad opened the night with a trembling voice. "Our youngest daughter, Madison, has always been the light of our family. She not only makes us proud, but makes all of Portland look up to her." Mom dabbed her eyes, nodding. Then he turned to me, as if remembering, adding, "And Riley, you're here tonight too. Thank you for coming. Being Madison's sister must be quite an experience, right?" The line drew a few chuckles. I pressed my lips together. The whole evening moved like a play I had seen countless times, where my role was always a blurry extra, appearing just long enough to fade back into the shadows. When the restaurant staff brought the gifts center stage, they added a short performance, Madison singing an original ballad while slides flashed photos of her life from plucking piano keys at 5 to church recitals to clippings from local papers. Not a single photo had me in it. No one noticed I was sitting at a table with a vase of wilted flowers, the ceiling light casting shadows across a glass of wine I hadn't touched. After the song came the gift giving. A record label rep gave Madison a crystal-studded microphone. A close friend presented her with a new arrangement for her upcoming album. My parents handed her the keys to a bright red Audi A5, nestled in a velvet box, revealed amid cheers. I received a scarf, hastily wrapped in a discount store paper bag. My mother handed it to me with a faint smile. I thought it looked nice, even if I got it a bit late. You always get cold around the shoulders, right? I nodded, my throat tightening. I had never liked wool scarves, and my mother had never asked me what I did like. I stayed seated, silent. Relatives walked past, congratulating Madison. A few paused to ask, "How's work going?" Then left before I could even finish 2 words. No one remembered I had just turned 30. No one asked if I was okay. No one knew I'd just been featured in a prestigious state architecture magazine, a 3-page spread about the hotel project I had led. No one saw the article, because it wasn't posted on my parents' Facebook. I just held my glass of water, rolling it lightly between my fingers, tracing the rim's cold edge. Madison came over as the crowd thinned. She leaned against the table, her voice brimming with excitement. "Isn't the car gorgeous? I never thought Mom and Dad would go that big. And the scarf Mom gave you is kind of cute too, right?" I smiled, tilting my head. "Yeah, it suits you perfectly," she beamed, not understanding what I meant, then turned back to greet more guests. I set my glass down, opened my purse, and touched the bundle wrapped carefully in a hard folder. Inside was my grandmother's handwritten will, along with the legal documents my lawyer and I had spent 4 months gathering. Every shaky line of her writing was proof that the 15-acre property in Salem, the land where I once played tag among the maples, was mine. Not Madison's, not my parents'. I slid it back into my purse, snapping the clasp shut. Not tonight, but soon. The silence they relied on to erase me from the party would be broken, not with anger, not with tears, but with truth. And with the legal ownership they never imagined I held in my hands. My parents had always called me reserved. They never guessed that through years of neglect, I hadn't collapsed. I had been preparing. I looked around the warm room, people laughing over a song, a car, a compliment for Madison. I wasn't sad anymore. I simply saw clearly. They had cast each role in this family long ago, and I had played mine too well for too long. I discovered the truth one late March afternoon over coffee with Charlotte, the only college friend who still kept in touch. Charlotte was a sharp inheritance lawyer, sparing with words, her memory unbending when it came to injustice. She once joked, half serious, "I don't need justice to be perfect. I just need it not to get trampled by family." That day, I only meant to ask her about a design contract that made me uneasy. But as the coffee cooled, I mentioned offhand that my parents had been talking about optimizing family assets and suggested Madison should hold the title to all of Grandma's property in Salem. I laughed bitterly, thinking it was another of their usual games. Charlotte didn't laugh. "Did your grandmother leave a will?" I froze, then nodded. "Yes. She wrote it by hand, signed at home, with a doctor as witness. I remember her telling me she wouldn't let the estate fall into the hands of people who didn't understand its value." Charlotte flipped open her laptop, scanning property and probate databases. I watched, not expecting much. I had grown used to things I thought were mine, ending up belonging to someone else. 12 minutes later, She turned the screen to me. Look. On it was the most recent filing with the Marion County Land Records. The registered owner of the 15 acres and the wooden estate house was Madison Whitmore. I couldn't react. Her name flashed across the screen like a slap to my forehead. That's impossible. Grandma never said she left it to her. She told me herself. I believe you, Charlotte said evenly. And I believe they did something shady. Could have been a power of attorney, or a forged will filed later. But if the original exists, this isn't over. We spent the next 2 weeks hunting for the original. Charlotte contacted the doctor who treated my grandmother in her final year, who led us to the nurse who had witnessed the signing, now retired in Oregon City. I drove over 2 hours to meet her, carrying oolong tea and questions I could barely form. The silver-haired woman, frail hands but sharp eyes, recognized me as soon as she opened the door. "You're Riley," I whispered. She nodded. "Your grandmother was so proud of you. She said you were the only one who never asked for anything. That's why she wanted you to have it all." Her words nearly broke me, but no tears came. My emotions were dried up like a riverbed after drought. She rummaged through an old wooden chest under her bed, pulling out a sealed envelope yellowed with age. On the front, my grandmother's slanted script read, "Open only if necessary. Riley." Inside was the handwritten will, complete with her signature, fingerprint, and the attestations of both doctor and nurse. Charlotte confirmed instantly. It was valid, still enforceable, unless a court had voided it. "What now?" I asked, clutching the envelope as though it might vanish. "Now we do this by the book. First, notarize it, then file a notice to halt all transactions involving that property. After that, submit it to court." "But Riley?" Charlotte met my eyes in the rearview mirror as we sat in her car. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once it starts, there's no turning back. And I promise you, this won't just be about property anymore." I stayed silent a long time. Driving back to Seattle, I didn't turn on the radio. I let the cold wind rush through the open window, my hand resting on the envelope, as if keeping Grandma with me. I saw her in my mind, sitting on the porch years ago, knitting a scarf, humming an old tune, then turning suddenly to me. "Never let anyone decide your worth for you. Not your parents, not society. You put your own name on it." I never thought I'd need those words so much. A few days later, I met Charlotte at her office. We finished. Notarization. Filed with the court, and drafted an injunction to freeze any further transfers. I told no one. Not my parents, not Madison. I didn't want to hear excuses, deflections, or mistakes from a notary's office. I just waited. I knew the moment would come, not because I wanted revenge, but because it was time to sit them down, place the paper on the table, and force them to read aloud the truth they had buried clearly, under the lights, in silence no one could cut short. It was late when I left the restaurant, the sting in my chest, not from unfinished wine, but from anger swallowed all evening. I drove slowly through Bellevue's empty streets, headlights blurring across damp pavement like smudged memories. My father's words still echoed. Being Madison's sister must be quite an experience. I didn't go home. Instead, I merged onto I-405 southbound, heading towards Seattle. Each mile I drove peeled away another layer of silence pressed on me for 30 years. When the Tesla dealership sign came into view, I didn't hesitate. I pulled in, tires crunching as the gate lowered for closing. A young security guard approached, frowning. I rolled the window down, voice steady. "I need to see a sales manager. It's late, but I won't take long." He studied me, then nodded, calling over the radio. Within minutes, a man in a light gray suit emerged, coffee cup still half full. His name was Dylan, the night sales manager, calm smile, unhurried tone, as if he knew late-night buyers carried decisions already weighed for weeks. What model are you looking for? Model X. Pearl white, beige interior. If you have it, I want it tonight. Dylan paused, not from surprise, but at the firmness in my tone. He led me inside, showing me one under soft golden LED lights. I ran my hand across the sleek hidden handle, the cool surface grounding me like a whispered reminder. I was in control. Dylan opened the door, letting me sit. I buckled in, eyes fixed on the glowing Tesla logo on the screen. For a moment, I wasn't alone anymore. I felt like I had driven straight into a threshold, not because it was shiny or expensive, but because it was fully my choice. In the finance room, I laid down an envelope with $70,000 in cash funds I had withdrawn the week before. Dylan blinked, surprised, then nodded and processed the paperwork. What line of work are you in, if you don't mind me asking? I smiled. Architecture, hotel interiors. I just finished a project in Bellevue. He nodded, respect flickering in his eyes. So, this isn't just a gift, it's a milestone. Exactly. When he handed me the electronic key, Dylan bowed slightly. Congratulations, the car's activated, and happy birthday if I guessed right. I left under the glow of the exterior lights. Driving back toward the city, I pulled over at Cary Park, the skyline glittering, the Space Needle piercing the indigo night. I parked at the edge, roof angled toward the city. I took out my phone, set up the frame. In the shot, the gleaming Model X reflecting city lights, Seattle sprawling behind it. I snapped a few photos, picked the perfect one, and opened Instagram. I didn't think too long about the caption. Happy 30th birthday to me, new chapter, new power. I hit post. Notifications started pouring in within minutes. Friends, colleagues, old classmates, even architects I'd only met once at a conference all chimed in. Amazing. Congrats, Riley. That car fits your energy perfectly. Private messages followed. The first came from Mason, head of marketing for the hotel chain I'd once worked with. We're starting a new project in Tacoma. Want to lead it? I smirked, surprised at myself for not feeling overwhelmed. I'd been ready for something bigger for a long time. I just hadn't had the chance to step fully into the light. Close to midnight, my phone rang. The screen lit up. Mom calling. I didn't pick up right away. I stared at the screen, at my mother's name, so familiar yet distant, as if the call wasn't to hear my voice, but to confirm what she had just seen. After 5 rings, it stopped. Less than a minute later, a text arrived. Where did you get that car? How much did it cost? Your dad is asking. Not a word of congratulations. Not a single line asking how I was. Just the same old worry about the family's image, something they never wanted me to redefine on my own terms. I typed slowly. I bought it with my own money. No loans, no handouts. And yes, today is my birthday. Seconds later, the phone lit up again. This time it was my dad. I stared at his name, not angry, not sad, just certain of one thing. The car I was sitting in wasn't a symbol of rebellion. It was a silent declaration from a woman who no longer needed praise to exist. I let the phone ring out, leaned back, and turned on the music. Piano notes filled the air, not Madison's, not from anyone's house, but from the premium sound system I had paid extra for. The melody blended with the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. For the first time in years, my birthday felt meaningful. No cake, no wishes, just me. And that, at last, was enough. The next morning, Mom called again. I had just brewed coffee, hadn't taken a sip when the phone rang, as if she'd been waiting for a reasonable hour to interrogate me. Standing in the kitchen, mug in hand, I felt strangely calm. Riley. Mom's voice was firm, no small talk. How did you pay for that car? Don't tell me you're in debt. I leaned against the counter, eyes on the Tesla parked outside, morning light glinting off the glass. No debt, Mom. My money. Legal. Clear. Silence, then a sigh. I just mean, we don't need flashy displays like that. Our family has never lived that way. I chuckled softly with no one to hear. And I've never had a birthday remembered on the right day. So tell me, who's really been living for show? She didn't answer. I heard movement behind her, probably Dad nearby. Her voice dropped. Come home this weekend. Your father wants to talk. The family needs clarity. You're making everyone uneasy. I set my cup down, still staring through the glass door. Fine, I'll come, but I'll drive myself. And I'll speak, not just listen. She hesitated, then agreed, as if realizing the balance of power had shifted. Saturday, I drove back to Portland. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray chill the Pacific Northwest wears like a signature every fall. I passed familiar streets, old neighborhoods where I once trudged home from school, backpack heavy, head down. The house hadn't changed. White siding, a wide porch, flower pots Mom had planted last year, now dried and brittle. It felt both familiar and foreign, like visiting a replica of my past. Dad stood outside as I pulled up, arms crossed. His eyes flicked over the Model X, barely concealing disapproval. Mom lingered behind him, smaller than I remembered. Madison wasn't there. I stepped out, expression steady, a small black bag in hand inside, the full file on the Salem property, carefully sealed. I didn't plan to use it today, but I brought it anyway. Not as protection, but as a reminder. This time, I wouldn't back down. We gathered at the dining table, the place where I had always felt most invisible. As a child, I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, maybe they'd notice I was there too. But it was always Madison, what she ate, what she studied, what she wanted. I just sat, ate, then cleaned up. Dad spoke first. Can you explain that car and the post online? Relatives are gossiping. I met his eyes. There's nothing to explain. I work, I earn, I buy what I want. What relatives say is their issue, not mine. He frowned, disappointment plain. You're acting. Reckless. Adults don't behave this way, Riley. Your mother and I just want to understand your finances. If there's a problem, there isn't. I cut in, calm and steady. On the contrary, I know exactly what I'm doing. Mom, silent until now, finally spoke. We're family, Riley. Any action that affects our image should be discussed. I tilted my head at her. Family, right? Then, in 30 years, how many times did you ask if I was okay? How many birthdays did you remember? How many of my achievements did you share, the way you bragged about every tiny demo Madison ever recorded? The room went silent. The ticking wall clock cut through the heavy air. Mom pressed her lips, staring at her hands. I went on, not pausing to gauge their reactions, something I had always done before. I stayed quiet for too long, thinking silence might earn recognition. But it never came. You never saw me as an adult. To you, I've only ever been Madison's shadow, the good child, because I never caused trouble. Dad's brows furrowed. Don't exaggerate. No one meant to neglect you. You're just too sensitive. I pulled out a paper and laid it on the table, the paid invoice for the car, with a $70,000 down payment. I'm not sensitive. I'm just done pretending. They stared at the number, shocked. Neither expected me to have that kind of money, but they didn't ask, because they knew nothing about my life these past 10 years. I stood, lifting my bag. I didn't come back for permission. I came to tell you that from now on I'll live by my own worth, whether you acknowledge it or not. I walked out, leaving behind their confusion and the stifling air. They didn't call after me, and I didn't need them to. Outside, the sky was still gray, but I wasn't. I returned to my Seattle condo the next morning, but my mind lingered on that dining table, where I'd left 30 years of swallowed pain laid bare. I had spoken the truth, unfiltered. And I wasn't finished. I hadn't come to ask. I had come to confront. And confrontation required proof and preparation. 6 days later, Mom called again. Her tone was lighter, though still carrying that familiar reluctance to admit anything. This weekend, if you're free, let's have dinner. Nothing heavy. We just need to talk properly. I agreed. But I didn't forget what I would bring to the table. Saturday, I returned to Portland. In my trunk was a custom cake from a boutique bakery near my apartment, bittersweet chocolate with smooth buttercream, the lid scripted in gold. Happy birthday, Riley, from me to me. I had asked for clean italic letters, no decorations. Simple, definitive, a reminder. When I walked in, Madison was already there, wine glass in hand, wearing a cream turtleneck, hair tied up, light makeup. Mom greeted me with just one line, "Thank you for coming." Dad was pouring wine at the table. The house felt different, no bustle, no performance. I set the cake box on the table without explanation, hung my coat, and sat across from Madison. She spoke first, maybe to ease the silence. "You look different these days, more confident." I only nodded. Mom served the main course beef bourguignon with garlic butter toast, my favorite. A dish she hadn't made in a decade. We ate in silence. Madison tried light chatter about her recording studio, a new artist she was working with. No one responded much. Finally, as dessert was brought out, I stood and opened my cake box. No one spoke when the words appeared through the clear lid. "Happy birthday, Riley. From me to me." Mom set down her spoon, eyes wide. "You ordered this?" I nodded. "I turned 30 last week." Not a word from anyone, not a text, not a wish. I waited. Not for pity, just to see if anyone remembered. Dad sighed, leaning back. "We were just busy. It wasn't intentional. You're making too much of this." I looked straight at him. Busy? For 30 years? When my birthdays always coincided with Madison's recitals, award nights, or exams? When I blew out candles alone in the kitchen while the rest of you went out to celebrate her school choir prize? Madison lowered her gaze, silent. I swallowed it all to avoid being the demanding child. But I won't stay silent anymore. I took an envelope from my bag, set it on the table, and slid it toward my father. "And this is what I need the family to read." He opened it, pulling out a copy of my grandmother's handwritten will. My mother froze. Madison lifted her head, frowning. "The original is with my lawyer," I said clearly. "It's been renotarized, with confirmation from 2 legal witnesses. Grandma left the entire property in Salem, including the old house, to me. To no one else." Dad set the paper down, his voice sharp. "Where did you get this?" "The will we filed with the land office is the one your mother kept. That's the official one. That's the one you created after she passed, using unauthorized power of attorney," I replied, still steady. "Charlotte went through the entire legal record of the property, and the notary's office confirmed no one but Grandma ever had the authority to make another will." Mom covered her mouth. Madison straightened. You mean that land was supposed to be yours?" I met her eyes. Mine weren't angry anymore, just firm. "Not supposed to. It island. That's the truth." Mom turned to Dad, her voice low, as if afraid to hear herself. "Harold, you said the law office had the paperwork cleaned up already." Dad frowned. "I just thought Madison was the logical heir. Riley lives in Seattle. She doesn't care." "I don't care?" I cut him off. "I spent my whole childhood on that land, pulling weeds with Grandma, planting lavender, repainting windows every summer. She was the only one who listened, who understood me. And she wrote it clearly in her will. If you all want to pretend otherwise, then tonight I'll make you see it again." Dad slumped back, heavy. Mom said nothing. Madison placed her hand on the table. "I didn't know, Riley. Honestly, I thought that land belonged to Mom and Dad already." I studied her. Something in her tone rang true. Madison had grown up in the spotlight, never needing to look sideways to see who was left behind. I didn't blame her. I blamed the ones who built that stage and forgot someone else was mopping the floor behind it. Now you know. And like I said, I'm not waiting for recognition. I came to put the truth back where it belongs. I pulled the cake from its box, cut it into 4 slices. No one touched theirs, but I placed one in front of each of them. Mine. I sat in front of Grandma's old seat. In the familiar empty space, nothing more needed saying, nothing left to negotiate, nothing to ask permission for. Dad broke the silence first. He slammed the papers shut, the sound sharp as a blade against wood. What is this, Riley? Making things up? Setting up your own family? Stirring chaos over a piece of land? I didn't blink. I'm not making things up. You staged a different play and erased my role from it. Dad stood, face flushed, finger stabbing the air at me. Don't speak so disrespectfully. What do you want? To make relatives think your parents are thieves? Or just to hurt Madison, to take away something she doesn't deserve? Madison, who had been quiet, turned toward me. Her voice shook. You think I knew about this? No one ever told me there was a will. I thought the Salem property was divided or something Mom and Dad bought outright. I never asked for it. I looked at her. Her eyes were genuinely bewildered, not feigned. Perhaps what exhausted me most wasn't Madison, but all the years I forced myself not to envy her. You never asked, but you always received. I said not blame, just fact. From my coat pocket, I pulled another file. Not the will, but emails Charlotte had traced from a law firm's account. Correspondence between my parents and a paralegal, dated and detailed, discussing how to transfer ownership of the property into Madison's name. One line read, "No need to tell Riley. She doesn't care about land, and she's far away, unlikely to interfere." I spread the pages out like cards at the end of a game. Mom reached for them, then stopped. Her eyes reddened. "Riley, we just thought, you never seemed to care. You never mentioned it." "Because no one ever asked," I replied, my tone cool as winter air. "You always assumed silence meant agreement." But silence just meant I was used to being ignored. Dad crossed his arms, his glare shifting from anger to defense. "Fine. If you want to make this a fight, then sue us. Take it to court. See who they believe." "I don't need to sue," I said. "I just need the truth corrected. And I've already done that." I slid across the legal notice from Charlotte's firm, an injunction freezing all transactions related to the disputed property, signed and filed with the Marion County Court. Madison skimmed it, her face paling. "So, everything's frozen?" "Temporarily," I answered. "Until the court decides who the rightful heir island. I don't want to force you into a corner. But I won't let anyone else decide my future through lies." Mom blinked rapidly, struggling to steady her breath. "We're a family." "Why does it have to go this far, Riley?" I tilted my head, and for a moment I saw a younger version of her, the woman too busy with Madison, forgetting my birthdays, wrapping cheap gifts and calling it thoughtful. "I grew up in a family where I was always overlooked," I said, my voice not angry anymore, just weary. "Now I choose to stand up for what's mine. If that makes you think I'm no longer part of this family, then so be it." Madison spoke, voice breaking. I don't know what to say, but if Grandma really chose you, then it should be yours." "I don't want to take anything from you," Dad snapped at her. "Madison, don't get soft. Everything's already arranged. There's no need to undo it." She shook her head. "Dad, that's exactly why we're here. Because you arranged everything without asking her. If it were me being cut out, I'd be furious too." Mom lowered her face. Dad went silent. For a moment, relief flickered inside me. Not because Madison was on my side, but because finally someone in this family tried to stand in my shoes. You don't have to pick sides, I told her. You didn't rewrite the will. But you don't have to close your eyes to what's wrong either. Dinner sat untouched. My birthday cake remained whole. The bittersweet chocolate hung in the air, sweet and heavy, like the truth laid bare. I gathered the papers, looked at my parents. I don't need apologies. I don't need fake concern. I just need the truth acknowledged. From now on, if you want to talk to me, say it honestly. I turned to Madison, giving a small nod. Thank you for not looking away, she whispered back. Thank you for finally saying it. I left the house I once belonged to, though I had never truly been inside it. The porch wind brushed my shoulders, carrying the stale scent I had waited a lifetime to escape. I didn't force myself to glance back. There was nothing left binding me anymore, just me, and the road ahead waiting to be rewritten by my own hand. I didn't drive straight back to Seattle that night. Instead, I booked a room at a small hotel by the Willamette River, far enough from familiar eyes, quiet enough to hear myself think. A single room, wide window, quail-colored drapes, soft light from a bedside lamp. I curled in the armchair, shoes kicked aside, phone, silent beside a cup of untouched tea. The night replayed in my head, every detail sharp enough to feel unreal. Madison, the sister I thought could never understand my loneliness, had stood with me, not out of obligation, not to prove herself. I remembered her words, if I were you, I couldn't stand it either. I'm sorry. Truly sorry for thinking everything was fair just because I was loved more. There was nothing dramatic in her apology. No tears, no sweeping collapse like in family movies. Just a softened voice, lowered eyes, and a light touch on my hand, a brief acknowledgement as heavy as all the forgotten years of childhood. I didn't grab her hand then. Part of me was stunned. Part of me feared it was another illusion I'd learned to expect. But when I walked out and she followed me to the porch, the wind rattling the rotting beams, I turned back. Are you sure? I asked, not in doubt, but wanting to hear it again. Madison nodded. I don't need the land. I need you. If fixing this starts with me, then so be it. 30 years waiting for those words, I didn't push them away for pride's sake. I didn't hug her or say thanks. I just nodded, exhaled, and unlocked my car. But from that moment, I knew the balance of our family had shifted. The next morning, I had breakfast alone at a riverside cafe. Black coffee and buttered toast. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison. If you're free tonight, dinner's on me, just us. There's something I want to say, not at home. I replied, okay, no questions. No need to know in advance. I could sense something changing in her, and for once, I was ready to listen. That evening, we met at a small Italian restaurant on Division Street. Not crowded, soft golden lights, a table by the window. Madison arrived early, no makeup, hair tied back. I sat, unfolded my napkin, and looked at her without speaking. She began. I used to think you were cold, distant, no sense of humor, no willingness to share. But now I see you were just protecting yourself. I stayed quiet, she went on. You never missed a single performance of mine. Not once. I never realized that until I looked back and couldn't even remember the last birthday of yours I'd been there for. I looked at her, candlelight reflecting in her tearful yet steady eyes. You can't undo what our parents did, but you can choose not to repeat it. I sighed. You didn't create this injustice, Maddie, but you lived in it too long without questioning it. Maybe that's what I've resented most. Madison nodded softly. You have every right to be angry. But I don't want you to keep walking forward with a heart hardened by a family that never opened theirs. I smiled not bitterly, but with release. I'm not hardening. I'm just learning not to hand my destiny to anyone else. She set her hand on the table. Then, will you give me a chance to make it right? I studied her for a long moment. Only if what you do doesn't come from guilt. I don't need pity. I need respect. She nodded. I understand. The following week, Madison sent an email to the family lawyer requesting her name be removed from all ownership records of the Salem property. She signed a formal disclaimer of inheritance with a note attached. I acknowledge sole ownership belongs to my sister Riley Whitmore under our grandmother's original will. I have no claims to usage, management, or disposition. The lawyer forwarded the document to me with a comment. In nearly 20 years of practice, this is the first time I've seen two sisters resolve an inheritance dispute without court. I rarely witness integrity like this. I read that line, set the email aside, and opened the balcony door. Seattle that day had gentle sunshine, a rare gift, soft as if reserved only for those who refuse to give up on themselves. That afternoon, I got a call from my mother. "Do you have time? I'd like to meet, just you and me." I didn't answer right away. I looked at my desk, where design studio plans lay spread out. Then at the dining table, where a new photo sat Madison and me at the restaurant, neither of us glowing, but both genuine. I lifted the phone. "What do you want to talk about?" She paused a few seconds. "I want to understand you, not to argue. But because I've spent too many years not realizing how important that was." I went still. "Send me the place. I'll come." We didn't hang up immediately. Each of us holding our phones tightly, maybe holding on to a bond long forgotten. I glanced at the car parked below, sunlight bouncing off its polished glass. It no longer symbolized defiance. It was a reward for persistence. And I was still moving forward with steadier breath, with faith rebuilt, not because I had to prove myself, but because I had reclaimed my place. And no one could erase my name from that table again. The next spring, I returned to the Oregon property on a misty morning, the Cascade breeze carrying the scent of pine and wild grass. The old wooden gate I once pushed open with my small hands was gone, replaced by an iron arch engraved with the name of the resort, Willow Haven, the place I chose to begin again, not as a survivor, but as a builder. The land that had been my grandmother's farm with its weathered cabin and alfalfa fields stretching to the tree line was transforming. I didn't bulldoze it. I didn't cover it in glass and concrete. I preserved its soul, careful as if cradling memory, and blended in modern, sustainable design that opened to nature. We built small bungalows along the stream, from reclaimed materials, cedar roofs cut from local mills. I hired young architects from Portland, bringing their ideas of ecology and community. I worked alongside them daily, not as an investor at a desk, but as someone lifting beams, checking joints. Madison came often, carrying her guitar and soft melodies. It was her idea to host weekend concerts for guests, in the gardens or inside the herb greenhouse. She composed the theme song for Willow Haven, a gentle folk tune, with lyrics that seemed to voice my heart. There's a house where the wild winds rest, and a girl who learned to build her nest. Her music became part of the spirit here, quiet but lasting. And my parents? They said little after Madison renounced her claim. No more pressure, no more manipulation. But whenever I went to Portland to meet lawyers or partners, my mother sent a short message. "If you're free, stop by for tea." At first, I didn't reply. Later, I went once. Not for long conversations, but to let her brew the tea, pour it into 2 cups, and sit in silence with me in the old kitchen. Some things can't be fixed overnight, but silence, too, can be a form of acceptance. My father was different. He kept his distance, sent no messages. Friends of the family told me he still referred to me as stubborn, someone unwilling to sacrifice for the bigger picture. But he didn't interfere. Maybe because he knew there was nothing left to control. Maybe because he saw I had truly changed, and no one could cast me back into the role they once wrote for me. On Willow Haven's opening day, I wore a simple olive linen dress, flats in hand from running around, greeting guests and checking staff. There was no red ribbon, no stage ceremony, Just a warm afternoon, people sitting on the grass beneath maple trees, sipping local wine, Madison's guitar weaving softly in the air. I stepped onto a small wooden platform by the pond, looking out at familiar and unfamiliar faces. Old colleagues from Seattle, the team of architects, chefs, local residents, and the partners who had trusted me enough to invest. Madison sat in the front row, her wet eyes shining. She held my mother's hand. Mom wore a cream cardigan pinned with the silver brooch I remembered once belonging to Grandma. My father stood further back, arms crossed, unreadable, but he was there. That was enough. I took the microphone and drew a deep breath. Someone once told me, a house isn't where you live, it's where you're seen and heard. For years I lived in houses without that. But today, I can say I've built one. The wind whispered through the trees. The crowd went still. I was once the forgotten child. My name left off meetings, family photos, even decisions about my future. But I'm not here to blame. I'm here because I learned to rewrite my own story. On land I thought was ashes, I found a door. I raised my glass of wine. Thank you for being here. Not to witness a ceremony, but to witness a journey of growth, of forgiveness, of daring to begin again. Willow Haven isn't just a place to rest, it's a place to come home to yourself. The applause rose, not thunderous, but heartfelt. Madison stood, walked up, and hugged me in front of everyone. Nothing rehearsed. She only whispered, "You did it, and I'm truly proud." I squeezed her shoulder, then looked down at my mother. She nodded, no smile, but her eyes softened. I didn't need her apology. I only needed her to see. I had walked my own road and returned whole. My father didn't step forward. But afterward, as I passed him heading back toward the kitchen, he stopped me. His voice low. "Beautiful, good landscaping, nice layout, shows an eye for detail." I couldn't tell if it was praise or reluctance, but I answered calmly, "Thank you for coming." He nodded, said nothing more, and walked away. I watched his figure fade behind the pines. No sadness, no regret. Some ties don't need clear endings, just the right place to stop. Night fell. Willow Haven lit up. The pond mirrored golden lights like falling stars. I stood on the ridge, looking at the glowing bungalows, hearing laughter drifting from the dining hall. The wind carried the scent of fresh wood, baked bread, and beginnings. I was no longer the girl erased from a family dinner table. I was the builder, the keeper of the keys, not just to the gate, but to my own life. And if anyone asked the greatest thing I gained after a year of upheaval, I wouldn't say profit or recognition or status. I would simply say, I chose myself, and I don't need approval for that anymore. What do you think of my journey? Of standing up to my own family, not just for property, but for my worth? I once believed if I tried hard enough, stayed quiet long enough, I would be acknowledged. But some people only see you when you dare to speak. And some things you only reclaim when you're brave enough to let go of their approval and trust yourself instead. I don't share this for pity or revenge. I share it because I know many out there, maybe you have been overlooked, hurt in your own homes, and I want you to know you're not alone. Every step you take to protect yourself, no matter how small, is an act of courage. If you've ever fought to be seen, to be respected, I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments. I'll read every word, because I know that feeling the fight to rewrite your own story. And if you care for true stories of families, betrayals, resilience, and unexpected turns, subscribe to this channel. Every week, I'll bring you new journeys about kinship, heartbreak, and rebirth. Stories where you just might see yourself. Because sometimes the right story at the right moment can change the way we see life.